Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome to the Leadership Insight Group. I have a special guest all the way from Canada, which is a great honor to have a good friend of mine, Dominic Scaffidi. I also have my co-host here, Harriet Anderson and Bart Lewis, who are always here to support me and support each other in creating such great webinars together. This particular webinar is about intentional leadership. And I discussed this with Dominic a good few weeks ago about the idea. And we both jumped at the idea of creating something about leadership and how intentionally we can create the world that we're in. So I'm going to let Dominic just introduce himself very quickly. You know who we are. There's other people here from different parts of the world, and what they can do is if they wish to raise questions, etc., they just mention their name, where they're from, and then they raise the question to Dominic. But first of all, let me just let Dominic just speak about what he does, and then we'll go straight into the webinar.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for this invitation to Richard, Bart, and Harriet. Thank you very much. So who I am, I'm a executive coach mostly, and my work sort of covers three things. I do one-to-one coaching with leaders in organizations. I also do team coaching where I'll work with a leadership team, an executive team as a whole. So doing team coaching with them. And then the third thing that I do on that corporate side is I also train leaders and managers to be effective coaches themselves. The way that I say it is that I work with leaders to become great coaches rather than good bosses. So it's using a different sort of approach in the way that they work with people. That's the context for the bulk of my work. Some other things, more on the other side, I also work with some individuals personally. And that kind of work, they tend to be entrepreneurs or people who want to create things in life, want to focus on something, create things in life. So a sort of a tagline for me is you create your own reality. And there's a whole exploration around that I do. And that also colors and comes into my work with organizations and with leaders.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dominic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's just jump into it straight away, Dominic. We talked about this intentional leadership, and we talked about, as you said, how clarity of intention becomes a primary tool for the game of creation. And one of the questions I raised was, well, what stops us from attempting to create that intention as an approach, etc. So I'm going to jump in straight away and ask for your opinion on that.
Well, yeah, it could be useful if you think in context of those two words, intentional leadership, and then maybe we'll say something about them. So leadership is kind of more common. We always talk about leadership, and then what we're doing is we're sort of describing it in a distinct way when we say intentional leadership. Leadership, if you think about that, we all do it. We all provide it in varying degrees. A lot of us, if we think about leadership within organizations, there is something from a leadership perspective that implies an ownership or willingness to own, willingness to hold something. Because you could be in an organization or actually any part of your life where, and we all are, right? We are in parts of our life where we have no leadership. we offer no leadership. And then there are areas of your life, and it's everywhere. It's like even in your family, it can be in your community. There's just places you offer no leadership. So you're kind of, the way to say it is that you aren't necessarily creating anything. You participate, you engage in reaction to whatever is happening, right? So to be anywhere not as a leader is to not declare or see an ownership of something, right? So that's the kind of like showing up to work, to a job or anywhere else and say, hey, look, I just work here, okay? So, you know, if there's anything you need me to do, like, let me know. I just work here. Whereas leadership implies that you will be the source of something. You will be the source of something. You declare that you will embody, let's say, the essence of something in the organization or in whatever context you're looking. So really with leadership, you are grounded in something, a purpose. It could be values of the organization, but you are grounded in something important. And it is, and I'll say it's an essence, an energy, some words like that. Because what we're really pointing to is something formless, would be the way to say it. And we all have the sense of it. If you walk into a retail store, you get a feeling in there. Like there's a feeling you have in a Starbucks compared to a feeling you have in a different kind of coffee outlet. So it seems to be, but it's hard to pinpoint because it looks to me like, well, but they all have seating and tables and they've all got machines. Like it looks like everything's the same, but we can't quite figure out what it is, this energy, this essence, this atmosphere. So in organizations, we'll speak about culture, values, purpose, and they give words to many of those things to try to put a form around something that is formless. And so that's leadership. Now, an intentional leadership. So as a leader is you're really declaring a kind of that you will be the source of something, the source of this, what that you'll own. And an intentional leadership is, I mean, the word has it in there. It is, I will lead with intention, which means that it will be focused. See, if I wasn't intentional, if I wasn't intentional about my day, if I wasn't intentional about what are we doing this year? Imagine I own an organization or I'm the leader of it. If we're not intentional, like what does it matter? Doesn't matter. Well, we'll see what comes up, right? What are we doing this year? We'll see, right? So it's more of a reactive to something. So the minute you bring intentional, you have to answer the question, well, what is it you want? What is it you want? And that it's not that easy to answer that question because there's kind of a commonplace of answering what is it you want, which goes back to the sort of, you could answer that question from the perspective of reacting to what's going on. Well, what do you mean? What do we want? I mean, sales are down, our costs are up. So what do we want? I'll react to all of that and I will declare the opposite. We want to lower costs. We want more efficiency. We want to increase sales. Well, that's not so intentional. What is that grounded in? What is that even based on? How is there any creation in that? There is only reaction. So depending what's going on in an organization is where basically the whole direction and what action is going to follow. With intention, you are stepping back. It could be in a way that what you are doing is withdrawing attention from what has already been created or manifest. The way the organization is right now, the way the structure is, the way the cadence of meetings goes, the way, you know, my family's organized, the kind of activities we do on the weekend. So all of that, some way, somehow, that got to be the way that it is. It got to be the way that it is. And so one thing you could do is react to it and change it. We need more free time. We need people to think more strategically. We've got to, you know, and you start to react to everything that's out there. And then that's kind of creating by default in a way. I'm not sure what you're creating, but it'll be something. Something's going to happen. There's going to be lots of activity. There may even be some improvements, but this is distinct from intentional. So not so much intentional. So for intentional, you want to answer this question: what is it that I want? What do we want? And so what do we want? And we look to where do we answer that question? And the most creative space of answering a question like that, this might sound odd, I'll have more to say about it later, but it's really to answer the question from nothing. It is as a declaration of what is it you want. That is the only, and it's interesting because this is like sort of the possibility of us as human beings. So we are able to stand in a place of being, in being that we are, a being, not a doing, right? We're a human being. That space of being is a space absent of any form. And you could say that that is nothing. And from that place of nothing, you can simply declare something into form. You can declare it into existence. Why? For no reason at all. Because if there was a reason, then it would be reacting to something. So we're able to declare, and that is true creation, I'll call pure creation, is to declare something into existence from nothing for no reason, not because, right? But simply because simply it arises as a desire within me. It arises as pure possibility. We say it because it's possible. It's possible, and in the saying of it, it calls me. It calls me, it draws me to it, and it draws others to it. And so that would be a little bit about intentional and a little bit about leadership and kind of how we, the framing of those two.
That's great. That's absolutely wonderful. There's plenty of questions I could ask there because you've just given us so much food to thought there of thinking of so many areas. I'm going to open the floor straight away because maybe there's one or two people here who wish to ask you a question directly of what it's for them and what they've just heard there before
Great.
I come in with some questions as well. Anyone like to just unmute themselves and just ask Dominic straight away? Any questions? Or everyone gone quiet?
Yeah, I have one.
Hey, Marion.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, I really like what you just said, and especially the last bit, because I could feel the energy coming out from you. So very inspiring. And it's true that I am between the being and doing. I love the idea, and but it's not easy to be in the being.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some tips?
Mm-hmm. What do you find in the distinction between those two? What do you find is your actual experience as you look at that? Where are you spending time?
Now, because of COVID, I have the time to develop my sense of being. That's why once more, it's great. And I'm going to start again a lot of trainings and things. And so I want to explore the being. And you, like you said, coming from nothing arises something, which is much more important than from your doing or your thinking.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you have some tips how to develop this ability?
Yeah. So the biggest, most important thing is the awareness that it's there, right? So that's number one thing, is it's an awareness that it's there. People walk around kind of not necessarily thinking, oh, I'm a human being. It's like the clue is in who we are, right? We're a human being. The clue is right there. But most of us walk around like we'll even introduce ourselves. Let me tell you what I do. Let me tell you what do we do. What do you do, right? So we're actually only ever talking about that part, the part that we see. It's how we understand each other. It's like, oh, so that's what you do. Well, here's what I do. And then even in organizations, we look, right? And it's sort of like, well, finance does that. IT does this other thing, right? So we're kind of all grounded and understanding each other, mostly in the doing part, right? So the being is something, beginning with, is just the awareness that it's there. And it's a little trickier because it's not as visible, right? It's not visible. It's not visible, yet it's impacting everything. In the world of leadership and organizations, a lot of work that I do with leaders is they'll sometimes tell me, oh, can you coach this leader on, can you coach them on their leadership presence? In the beginning, I used to go, leadership presence, right? How odd that is, right? So leadership presence. So that starts to speak to that, yeah, there's some presence. They have something emits from them. Is like exuding like an energy or a feeling or a sense. And we all get that with leaders. Marion, you said, one of the things you said is when I was speaking, you said, oh, I really felt the energy at some point of something that I had said. So this is the power of this essence, presence, and being. What you felt, because that related to being, what you felt was a resonance with it. See, you could think, oh, I like what you said. I like what you said. I agreed with it. That's that's a surface level thing. But what happens in more of what happens there and at a being state is, I'm not sure I even understood what you said. I don't know that I even got it, but it resonated with me as true and as important, right? And so what it is the essence of it is activated. There's a harmony about it. And this is the power of leadership when it comes to that. What really makes a difference with leaders, we know this too, politicians and everybody, what they're talking, we do not listen to their words. We don't hear a thing they say. We just pick up a vibe. We just pick up the vibe, whether this is something that is attracting me, that is calling me, whether they are activating a possibility, some future, some desire, which calls me forth or not. Right? So, Marion, with this, the beginning part is just the fact that it's I'm aware that there's something there, And now I can start to bring some attention to that this is there, it's in me, it's part of my leadership. It could be the most important part of my leadership, but how much time am I spending reflecting, being aware on this, compared to how much time am I spending saying, okay, so what's my strategy for this project, this piece of work? What am I going to do next? What's the first thing to do? How can I, like, and there's some balance of attention that says, hey, plug into being, and then go out from there, because that is a more grounded way of leading. Great question.
Superb question. Anyone else got any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question.
George, go ahead.
Yeah, Dominic, I follow what you said, and I completely agree with the fact that, you know, being, we should concentrate on being. But the question is, in today's society, the emphasis is on not who we are, but what we do. And as you said, you know, what do you do? What's your job? And we define ourselves just by what we do. Now, in other words, I mean, it's easier to say, this is what I do, versus to say, this is who I am. Because this is who I am is much more complex than this is what I do. So, I mean, we are the victim of a few things, of a, you know, societal pressure, societal values, and also the fact that you know, it's kind of difficult to express in a few words or in a few the essence and the depth and of our personality and what we stand for. And the leader, to me, is the one that is able to, you know, to convey some kind of vision of his value and things like that. So my question is, how can we become better at showing who we are, what's our substance is, and kind of not ignoring, but you know, putting aside trivial conversation about what we do.
Yeah, that's yeah, excellent question, because it makes it practical and real life, right? Because in real life, I get your point, George. We can't go around you know, not answering these questions for people. And especially with leaders, when you look at leadership in organizations, there's a practicality to it too, right? People gather in a room and they're, you know, looking at the next quarter, and they're looking at, you know, what sales trends or something like that they may be looking at. And so everyone is asking the question, so what should we do? Right? Like that, it kind of like dives in. You know, even practically, you look at something like even in your family, and imagine, you know, something like a ritual that's quite common is having dinner, right? So you sit down, you have dinner, and what's that like? What, you know, there's a lot of sort of doing around that, right? It's the food is cooked and sat, and we all sit there, there's conversation, right? And so that the way we know it is by the action of it. It's like what we're all doing, but the value in it is actually how we are left, nurtured, the feeling, right? The connection, the bond. Now, let's maybe that one's such an easy practical one of this mix of doing and being, right? So I don't know about you, but how many of you have had where, you know, you sit down for dinner, and I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember this happening quite a bit. Sit down for dinner, it's all great. The kids ask some question or the topic goes to something. Next thing you know, there's a big argument. And there's this argument. Then there's an argument about who's cleaning up, who's like, the whole thing is just this disaster. And you kind of go, what happened? Like, how did this turn into this thing? And that's a real example of, there was no intention. Nobody grounded in any intention, sort of like kind of lazily showing up, and then whatever went on. Not connected to anything, no sense of, the purpose or what the possibility was in this, right? Same thing happens in organizations when you hold a meeting, which was really, it was this meeting to come up with next year's strategy, which ends up with nothing but, the finance department hates marketing. Because marketing is overspending, and and then this is what happens. And you go, wow, how did this even happen? I mean, we started out with, right? So as a leader, what do? Because as this stuff's going on, again, where are you grounded? And have you come in with some clarity of intention, purpose, essence? What is it we want here? And so how can you hold that? And how can you, it's sort of like to Marion's question, these are difficult things to point to being, but you can do it by moving attention over there. And attention, the easiest way to move attention, usually, your questions. So your questions will direct attention. As a leader, leaders think they have a lot of power by telling people things. Okay, let me tell you how this is going to go and who we're doing. And everyone sits back and goes, yeah, right. No, we're not doing it that way. Right? Whereas when you're using questions, you direct attention. Right? So you say, hey, we're here together. Listen, we've got 90 minutes right now. What if this meeting was really valuable? What would we want to have by the end of it? What's our real intention here? Now, once you start asking a question like that, everybody's attention goes from what do we got to do? What do we got to do? What do we got to do? To wait a minute. What did he just say? So what do we want to have at the end of this? What do we want to leave her with? I got to back up and think about that. That's how you know that people now are reflecting. You asked a question to which they do not have an answer, which is a good thing, because if you ask a question to which they do not have an answer, they must inquire, they must wonder, and then they must declare. So suddenly they declare, and they automatically become more intentional in this meeting, automatically become more intentional from that declaration, right? This is what we want. This is what would be a good use of the time. So that's a way of trying to get to something invisible, but practically, so that it directs attention in that way. Is that much helpful?
Yes, definitely. This is, to refocus on what is the intention of the meeting and the purpose, why we are here. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And by the way, as a leader, that's essential for you to be grounded in it. Otherwise, you can't lead, right? You walk in with everybody else. This project is off the rails. It's a mess. It's over budget. And you walk in with everybody else, no intention, right? Then you're just in there with everybody. Right? So whereas if you're leading, if you're really wanting to bring leadership there, and by the way, you don't even have to be the boss in this case. Even if you get into one of these meetings and it's just a mess, or even in your family, right? Like in the example with the family, you say, hey, you know what? I don't know what just happened here, but is this the way we want these dinners to go? When we all do our own thing. We're all busy doing our own thing, right? And then we get together for dinner. We spend about an hour. How do you want this to be? Like, what do you want to happen during the dinner? That's actually would be worthwhile, would be valuable. Suddenly it stops everybody in their tracks because it has them wonder, like, what is the atmosphere we want? intention here? What could happen? What's the possibility of this? That actually could be something valuable that we want, instead of whatever just happened that not any one person wants. Nobody wants that. But that's where we are. Yeah.
I hear
Thank
that emotional control is indispensable, huh? In this kind of situation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is all. And that's a good point, because it's your own self-awareness. The emotional control is, to what degree are you paying attention to the way you feel? Because the way you feel has so much information in it. So I'll do a shortcut, but if I feel good, I am aligned with the best within me and what I desire, what I want. If I feel good, I am in alignment with that. If I feel bad, I am in disharmony with that. And so how long does it take you to wake up? Right? I'll tell you, there have been, the ones why I gave you the dinner examples, I didn't wake up. Something happened. I got into the conversation. Before you know it, there was a big argument. I didn't wake up. I just kept going and going and going with no noticing that I'm starting to get impatient. I'm starting to be really angry, and no noticing of it. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. And so that awareness of how do I feel? Is this the feeling? Am I in harmony? Am I here bringing me, the best in me here? Right? And that offers some guidance. Yeah. Great questions.
Great question, George.
Thank you.
Great question. Anyone else? Marianne, go ahead.
It's just the difference between attention and intention. You know, sometimes you are in the middle of, like you explained about the marketing and the finance and the family and so on. You have your intentions and you can ask about intentions. Sometimes the attention, voilà.
Yeah. So it would be when you ask that, attention is more general awareness of all of it, right? Intention brings direction to it. You can drive. You drive. It's useful to drive with high levels of attention, right? Pay attention to what's going on. There's lights, there's people, there's other cars, right? What's happening though, that starts to influence your choices and actions as you're driving, is your intention. I have an intention. See, because I can drive with lots of attention and crash into people, right? But if my intention is for safety, if my intention is for comfort, my intention is to get to a particular place, my intention is to have a pleasant experience on the road. So these intentions now take my attention and they allow choices and actions to arise from them. Okay? So the choices and actions become apparent relative to intention. So it's like, I get in and I'm putting my seatbelt on. I will drive at limit, thereabouts. I'm going to check around. So the actions that start to make sense, they're this combination of my high level of awareness combined with intention, right? Is that helpful?
Yes, very, because, I could be somebody who likes nice atmosphere, and if I don't have any attention, I might not see what happens really in reality, and my intention would be to have a nice, but I would be by myself. And I think you have to have the right balance between attention of what there is and the intention, and try to make sure that everybody goes that direction, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right. Yes. Yeah, as that's like being you know, in a meeting or in within your company leading something, and you don't have attention on, you know, what everyone else's priorities are or what's going on, and you don't realize that, you know, that either what you're talking about is just not important given the context of what the organization is going through, or that what you're finding is that this meeting is going on to solve a particular problem, but you're not paying attention. You don't realize that the HR person is not even engaged, and it's really only finance talking to sales, and no one else is even doing anything. And so you're not paying attention, so you don't realize that, but that's not what we wanted. And you know, and our culture is one of collaboration. And so we want everyone's input. And so you need both the attention and knowing what you're trying to create here, right? So guides. Yeah.
Beautiful,
Thank you.
man. Beautiful. Thanks. Thanks, Dominic. Anyone else? Any questions? Just unmute yourselves. Not at all. Michael, Bart? No.
Then I continue. I wrote in the conversation a quoting of Gandhi.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
you did. Yeah, there goes my people. I must follow them, for I am their leader. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah, I love that. You know, and do you have a question on the quote, or were you, I don't know, Marian, is that the quote seemed to appeal to you?
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm taking too much time. Yeah, but that's what came from what you said in the beginning. I hardly listened to you.
Yes.
This came up. You know, like we said about the politicians. I'm the same thing. Because I didn't know you, so I decided.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, that quote is really interesting because what it does as a leader, part of what you're doing is and this is true in organizations, or what it is you are willing to lead in a way. You don't have to, right? You don't have to. If for sure this happens, you know, with politicians, or you take the example with Gandhi, it was like kind of like, well, you don't have to be the face of this movement. You don't have to, you know, embody. It's interesting the way he said it. It's like, it's you see where the people are going, and then you follow as their leader. See, there's something in there. It's a high level of sensitivity, a high level of attention to something is wanted here. There is something desired here. And when you're paying attention to the asking the desire for something better in the world, right? Now what it is that there is an energy moving towards something better, right? And it needs leadership, or leadership could be helpful, right? So really what's a leader doing is listening. They're listening for what is this desire, that people are being moved toward. And then that leader is willing to embody that possibility and be that possibility, stand for that possibility, express more of that possibility into the world. So they take it from the energy that they sense of where people are wanting to go, what's wanting to happen. And so they sense it at an energy, essence level, and give voice to it. Voice to it. And this goes back to the beginning part, where if they give voice to something that is not in essence really there, they will not be heard. No one will listen to them. It will not resonate, right? So if they give voice to an energy that is not really there, if they're not sensitive in picking up what the desire is, what they give voice to will not resonate. Martin Luther King's a good example, right? There's stuff going on. It had been going on forever, right? And he actually even used words, right? Like took something and then he said, I have a dream. Right? It's like, it was very much like, here is a reality, which he ignored, right? Here is a reality, and I have a dream, right? And then he articulated a dream into form that was nothing like this reality. And the minute you do that, you've set up a gap and a tension. There's a tension and a gap that's been set up because now there is a reality and you just articulated into form a vision, a possibility over here. I think there's a great analogy in the book, The Fifth Discipline. Peter Senge, I think that's where I read this years ago, is he said, in that idea of this vision and possibility compared to current reality, said, imagine an elastic band that goes around the two, right? So a tension has been set up, right? And here's the thing from a leadership perspective. Once you set up this kind of a tension, this will move in one of two ways. Current reality, a future possibility and vision articulated by the leader, an elastic band around that, and a tension has now been formed. And one of two things is going to happen. Either this current reality will call back this leadership and have them be more realistic. So we'll call back this possibility, bring it into current reality, and have everyone be more realistic, right? Or the leadership is strong enough, it refuses to budge. Now, refuses to budge is not fighting. It's distinct. Refusing to budge is standing firm, standing grounded in something. Standing grounded in something is not fighting anything. There's no fighting of anything. It is standing in that and exuding that and being the essence of that. And when you're the essence of something that is not in reality, it is not in reality, reality must move. Eventually, this reality must shift and change if you refuse to move. If enough leadership is here, right, then it must change. And eventually this reality begins to shift and change. The elastic band is moving this reality up into this vision of the possibility that you're standing for. Yeah. Good quote.
Yeah, beautiful quote. Dominic, we've got about 10, 15 minutes. I see Nemo wanting to ask something. Go ahead.
Yeah, with all that you're talking about the resonance and taking a stand and Gandhi's quote and the dream, it all feels there is a ground of readiness there. And if that readiness is not there, it's the energy that they sense, the leader senses. And so he's in resonance with this change, the transformation that is to happen. And then it all falls into place. Because he's voicing the resonance, he's voicing the energy of the possibility of the transformation, it seems. Yeah. So it's the readiness, the divine timing that we call it, or it's a preparedness, the readiness for transformation.
That's such a good point about the readiness, because this is why if you you know, to some degree, right, there's not a lot to do around trying to figure it all out, to some degree. Like, in other words, we don't have to think about everything, right? It's like, oh, well, I have, this is real vision, but I need to do an assessment to figure out the readiness. Like, because this is a lot of like change management consultants and stuff. They'll get into this sort of activity, right, of doing all of these things. If you start with a perspective just of energy, right, then all there is energy and resonance. And so whatever you are declaring, tuning to a possibility, what is the degree of resonance of this? That translates into readiness, because it can be heard, right? It can be heard. Now there's different degrees of readiness too with people. Like, so some things you say are highly harmonious. So there is a group of people that will resonate with it and be immediately enrolled in it. They are excited, energized by this possibility that you've declared, right? And so that group, some group, would be able to, you could engage at a very high level, potentially, because they will be moved to action from that sort of resonance. But then there's other groups that are less, and there's still things that can happen. So for instance, this group over here who slightly resonates, but don't yet see the possibility. So there'd be like a different way of communicating, right? It's a different way of communicating and different possibilities for them to engage in this, but not at the same degree as the others. So the readiness part becomes important, and you can notice from the degree of enrollment is the word that I would use, how much people are enrolled. It's almost like, then what's the work to do, you know, with this group compared to that group compared to the other group. Some groups, it's, you know, change processes, they'll say this too. They'll say, you know, over here is only communication. Over here, this group is more about the planning of it. And over here, the group is about, you know, and so you'd have different sort of things that you could act on. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nima. Anyone else for the last 5-10 minutes?
I have
Rada,
a question.
go
Hey,
ahead.
Richard. Hello.
Hello.
When you talk about intentional leadership, Dominic, it reminds me of servant leadership. But for me, there is one dynamic more, but I can't express what it is. Could you help me out on that?
Oh, yeah. So you're right. I can see the parallels a lot with servant leadership, right? Because there's something around it which is you know, ideally, as an energy in any of this stuff, if we hit this right, the way we be within it will be, I'm going to use the word effortless. We have a way of being within it as a leader that is effortless. And why it's effortless is because to be anything, the being of it, requires no effort, right? So I be who I am without working at it. All the effort seems to come up when I'm resisting and filtering who I am, or have some thought or belief that who I am and my being is not good enough to get this done. So now I'm going to have to do some other things that are unnatural to me. And so, right. So the thing with servant leadership is that it also has that sense of effortlessness to it, because serving to some degree becomes effortless. So I've never thought of this till you asked the question, but I wonder if this fits what some of the conversation that's been going on, including the quote, where the servant aspect about it is the listening for what's wanted beyond me. And that part is, you know, I have to resonate with it. Otherwise I can't lead, but I'm listening for what is wanted, what is happening here. And then the willingness that we talked about earlier, I am willing to serve this desire, this wanted, this future, this possibility, right? I love that combination, how you've described it.
Yeah, and I'm still thinking about the metaphor of the iceberg of McClelland. So it's then the intention is then all at the bottom, which is motivation, our values. It's really at the bottom. It's not what we think. It's not what we do. Huh? All right.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very good. So in the metaphor, what's underneath the surface is invisible. And so we can't see it. And that's what, but most, you know, and around this leadership stuff, most things in leadership say, okay, let's get in a room. We're going to teach you what to do to be a leader. So we're going to teach you these aspects. You need to be strategic. You need to, and then they teach you above the iceberg. What's missing is, but all this action is first of all, a tiny piece of it, but what it's driven by is actually a ground of being underneath. It's the intention and where you are coming from. And by the way, people will forgive you for everything. It's like, oh, you don't talk well, you're not very clear. They forgive all of that because they pick up a being, an energy, and they want to follow. So all the rules don't even matter, right? They say, oh, you know, you need to be a good articulator, you need to be whatever, but people don't care because what's underneath speaks so loudly.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Dominic, we've just come up to the hour. So awesome. I don't know, do you have one more question if anyone's got a question?
I'm fine. If anyone does, I'm good to take it.
Great.
I just
George,
wanted to say maybe, Dominic, that what you describe, maybe this is what makes me think of the qualities are the things that are intangible. You said, you know, you got to be strategic, articulate, etc., etc. These are things that you can touch, you know, but what's beneath is the intangible, is the essence, it's the core of your being that makes the difference, right?
Right on. And this is where the greatest attention, focus from a leadership development perspective is to some degree the most difficult thing. Because what's easy, that I can show you workshops and here's an agenda and these will be the outcomes at the end of it. And everything is above the iceberg, right? And it sells. It sells because the company wants, oh, I want leaders who have more this and I want to teach them this and this. And it's kind of like, but the part that makes the difference is really an internal work. Now, the value of that becomes that when you have a leader connected to source, I'm going to call it. So a leader connected to source is more powerful than millions who are not. And we know this because that's how come you get a Martin Luther King who impacts more than, you know, all kinds against, who are disconnected, who are hating, who are in reaction mode. And then you get one leader who has a connection to something really important. And then that expressed into the world has a power beyond anything. So it's hard to sort of speak because it's invisible, but it is a self-awareness work. It's a work on yourself to get to a groundedness that then, with very little attention, on what to do. Here's the crazy thing. All these leaders are really smart. They're very accomplished. They're very intelligent. And then we put them in a classroom to teach them these things. It bores them. Because that's not the point. They could figure all this out and they could read it on a weekend if there was something there about strategy they needed to learn, right? So what we should be doing is something deeper than that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, George. Anyone else before we close? No, I think that's a great time to finish this webinar. We didn't get through the questions that we actually raised on the post, but as always, it's always great to have you, Dominic. Dominic, where can people get hold of you? Because we're going to put this recorded on the social media. Where can people get hold of you if they wish to contact you?
So very good. My company name with the corporate work that I do is HR Possibilities, and it's hrpossibilities.com. And then on the personal side, if you use my name, dominicscaffidi.com, you'll see a personal website. And actually on that website, it'll send you back. It'll give you a link on corporate executive coaching to take you back the other way too. So both directions.
That's great. That's great. They'll be posted anyway in the comments as well. So, but well, it's a big thank you from me because I really appreciate your time and our friendship as well. So really thanks again. And thanks to everyone for turning up and attending, because I think it's been very inspirational. I'd love to bring you back maybe later on and we'll continue with the topic again, because I think it's very interesting how being that leadership. Sorry, Harriet?
I was just saying, yes, please come back, Dominic, yes.
Oh, well, yeah, this is a great group. I love your engagement and your questions. I've learned a lot too through your questions. This is great.
It's great. Listen,
good stuff, Dominic.
Thank you, Bart. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me back to these. Yeah.
If anyone wants to unmute and say thank you to Dominic, then please do. Everyone's welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, great meeting everyone.
Thanks, Dominic. To everyone, and
you.
take care, and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Oh.